Hey everyone, let's have a look at one example of what was the state of the art for traditional brick-based Lego building sets in the year 2000. This is one of two of the first Ultimate Collector Series sets released that year, the other one being the, frankly, more substantial, more impressive, more detailed X-Wing. Unlike the X-Wing, this TIE Interceptor here has not been remade since. This remains the only Ultimate Collector Series TIE Interceptor. They've only even made a minifigure scaled, more standard scaled version of a TIE Interceptor once, making this still something a little bit special, even though it only came with just over 700 pieces. At least by today's standards, with today's money, this would have retailed for under $150. A very terrible price to part ratio, but not too bad for the overall size of what you get here and how it looks on display. Now, I haven't yet collected the standard scale vintage TIE Interceptor. However, I do have one of the old TIE Fighters for comparison, so it just shows you how much of a difference in size and scale that they ended up going for. However, for just a little more interesting perspective, relative to what we know today. This is one of the original TIE Fighters. Well, here's one of the more recent TIE Fighters, and let me just line this up in a fair way, actually get them roughly at the same distance from you to just give you a little better idea of the sizes that we're dealing with for what was considered normal and what was considered huge in those days to compare to what's considered normal today. Here's another way of looking at it with all of the canopies the same distance from you. The canopy on this UCS set used a unique print, and it's a fairly large piece, and it had to be printed from all around. That probably accounted for a disproportionate portion of the price of this set. The interior had a decent amount of detail, including a flight yoke set, using a couple of sextant pieces here. We had a printed brick up here on the top, and there are more printed pieces inside. There's a better look at a couple of them to the pilot's right, and there are the ones on the opposite side. The pilot's seat itself was shaped up and textured a bit. The top used the same printed hatch piece as the smaller TIEs, but unlike those little guys, this one could not be hinged open. The back of the fuselage is somewhat plain, but I'm personally rather partial to the shaping right there at the center. It's just a little bit of texturing that you don't frequently see that's exposed on the underside of that large octagonal piece. And then the wing struts themselves just use pretty respectable building on multiple sides. Each of the four main wing panels is built the same, with two large 8x8 grated pieces that you can see through to give you a little bit of that texturing like the solar panels. And they do use some flexible hose pieces here, the rigid 3mm ones in blue. Wing tip detail uses a grill, some clips, a lightsaber-sized bar, and a spear gun. You can see that a little bit more clearly from this angle. The center sections of the wings are maybe a little bit more interesting with their shaping and use of parts, with the telephone handset pieces over on the right, and they even brought in a couple of shovels, and once again it's a little bit easier to see going across to the other side and looking at it from effectively the inside. Also at the back on either side they have a couple of jet engine pieces. Now there's a weird thing that goes on with the stand. You can have the whole Interceptor angled back, but you can also bring it forward, which feels very uncomfortable. It brings this almost completely parallel to the ground, but it really feels like it wants to fall forward. I don't think it actually will, but just as you move it back and forth, especially towards the front, it just has that feeling that it wants to continue to go. Here's what's going on. They use a combination of modern lift arms as well as the old Technic bricks, and there's just a little bit of movement forward and back, which translates to a whole lot of movement of that large and fairly long model. Want to see something else freaky? Well, all of these UCS sets have their little plaque to give you more information, to make it seem more like a museum piece. The sticker is in good shape for its age, but look at how it was applied. They didn't have the large tile piece that they use today. So this is a whole bunch of tiles that are just lined up, one by tiles going all the way across. That one sticker is covering all of those. Certainly in its day, this was impressive, most impressive. But by today's standards, the small parts count would be considered absolutely unacceptable for an Ultimate Collector's Series set. However, again, to this day, this does remain the one and only UCS, official UCS TIE Interceptor. So it still has quite a bit of nostalgic value and a good amount of value for collection in general, even in a modern context, at least until they come up with another one. Well, that's it for my look at this set. There's really not a whole lot to see for a UCS set, given its fairly relatively simple construction. If you'd like to say anything about this, please do feel free to leave your comments on the video down below. And if you want to see more videos from me, be sure to come back and check out my channel on a regular basis, because YouTube itself won't always let you know when new videos come out. So thank you for your support, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.